Excuse me, Janine, I'm gonna squeeze by you here. Hello, everyone. Welcome. The way this evening was designed is for everyone to be able to enjoy food while having great conversation and hearing wonderful stories about DCC's past. Not only are there the people here in this room, there are people on Zoom, who at least 8 or 9, I believe, who are there. And hopefully they are hearing me now. And if not, perhaps they will let me know in the chat in a moment, and I will try to get them fully connected. We've got a couple of little pieces of business to do before we get started with the main program. And wait, you were on Zoom. How did that happen? Oh, God, they must be located on your. Now I lost my thought. I was just looking at Dawn Adams on the Zoom screen, and there she stands. But anyway, so the first thing is that in addition to this being the 50th anniversary celebration for Denali Citizens Council, it is serving as our annual general membership meeting, which by our bylaws we must have once every year. So here you are participating in the annual membership meeting. The only thing that we really majorly cover during the membership meeting is the changing of the guard for the board of directors. Those of you who are members and dues paying members will have received a ballot, an electronic ballot, and hopefully you voted. At least 43 of you did, because I am pleased to say that we had 2 board members running for re-election this year, Steve Carwile and Nancy Russell, and they have both, in fact, been re-elected to the Denali Citizens Council board by overwhelming majority. Scott was our official vote tallier. I believe they each received 43 votes. So, in addition, many of you did suggest other people who could be board members. Some of those are in the room, and yeah, we can make you board members right here. No, we're not going to do it. But it's a risk coming to one of these because you never know. We do have a retiring board member. Nan Eagleson, who, as you know, because unfortunately at the last minute was not able to be here for this, is stepping down from the board. Our record keeping is sufficiently great that we don't actually know how long Nan Eagleson has been on the board of directors, but it's been a very long time. It's been at least 20 years. We greatly appreciate what she has done for us, and we have acquired a gift. Where?
Literally sitting next to you.
Oh, here. Sorry. A Renan Caro piece that we are very happy to be able to provide. So, for those of you who are considering a position on the board, consider that after 20 years, this could be you. Just letting you know, I will now surrender this to Bourbon. Right. Second item of business. We want to give big thank yous to the folks who provided our food this evening. All of this food was donated, and I'm going to have Nancy Russell briefly tell you which of our local eateries were kind enough to provide the food she's eating right this second.
Yeah, right. So I approached a lot of the local restaurants, and the village gave us the empanadas that are on the end, and,
The bacon wrapped scallops.
and the bacon wrapped scallops, they came from the village. And, so Aramark, but then Aramark, their employee dining hall brought in tons and tons and tons of stuff. And we got the pizzas from Panorama Pizza and the crab dip from Princess. And the desserts came from McKinley Creekside. There's brownies at the end of the line for later if you want. So, please support our local businesses because they really keep through for us.
They did, they came through. And also thanks to Denali Education Center, which likewise has loaned us this beautiful space in which to have this meeting tonight. So for Jody Rodwell and all the folks at DEC, we are so thankful to be able to meet here. This is just such an, oh, here's Jody over here. Just got in too late to hear things, but we do thank you, Jody. All right. So I believe those are the really important things I needed to cover before we get going tonight. Oh, Nancy's waving at me. She wants to make sure that everyone signs in. This was a general invitation, so even though you registered to be here, there are a lot of people who did not register to be here, which is fine because we wanted folks to have the chance to come, even if you didn't get around to signing up online. But we are curious to know. We just want, because it is partly because it is our annual membership meeting, we just want a good accounting of who was here for this. So the clipboard will be coming around, and please do sign your name to it.
And you can do it on the way out, but please try to remember, and we'll get you on our work list and all.
Yeah. All right. So now on to the really good stuff, which is a program that we've entitled Stories of the Past, Vision for the Future. And it's intended to do a couple of things. One, because we have been here 50 years, we want to look back and talk about what we have accomplished over all this time. And we're going to have 4 panelists up here to talk about what the really important things that they were involved in while they were here, the important role the DCC played for the park and the community. But as I look out here, there are an equal, I mean, we picked 4 kind of arbitrarily almost, because there are so many people here that have given time to this organization on the board, as staff, as volunteers. Please don't think that we are ignoring you. We know that we just don't have time in one evening for everyone to hear everyone's stories, that we are going to hear as many as we can. After the panel discussion, we're then going to have more of an open discussion about what's important for the future. The issues that have motivated DCC and DCC membership in the past may not be the same issues that motivate us in the future. Our role in the community working at the park may not need to be the same as it's been in the past. And that's what we want to think about some tonight. And really, it's part of an ongoing discussion. Some of you have actually sat down with some of you over the past couple of years and had a similar conversation. We're continuing that. We need to figure out a reason to continue to be for another 50 years. And for that, we need to understand what's important about DCC to you now and what may be important in the future. I would invite my panelists to come up front, and I will give also all too brief an introduction of you all. So Jerry, Henry, Nancy, and Linda.
Stare us down from the front seat.
All right. And I'm going to move to the side, and I fear maybe out of my camera angle, but I will, unfortunately, I'm also tonight's camera operator. I mean, we are all running around wearing multiple hats, and we've had a couple of absences among board members, which means we wear more hats than normal. So, did I introduce myself? Charlie Lowe, President of DCC. If I forgot that and you didn't know me, now you do. These are all board members or former board members of the organization here to tell you their stories. Nancy Bale, also former president of DCC, and still on the current board. Linda Franklin, who was on the board back in the 1990s and served as president for a while. Henry Friedman, 80s and 90s, and president during both eras, I believe. And Jerry Cole, representing the 70s and early 80s period from the board of that time. And I'm very pleased to say that we have moderating this panel, not me, because I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing from me, but we have Sue Dio, who served as our community organizer back when we had staff in the 2010s, or 2000s, yeah, sorry, decade before that. Yeah, and so I am going to turn this whole discussion over to Sue to lead us through both the panel discussion and the audience discussion to follow. Are there any questions, concerns? Everyone good? Everyone's feeling well fed? There'll be opportunity for seconds later. Thank you so much. Sue, all yours.
Please. And a little bit. I was a community organizer for DCC back for a few years, 2004 and 5, 3, 4, and 5 maybe, but one of those years anyway. And I did newsletters. I did a number of things. I actually have a lot of over 25 or 30 years of experience with nonprofits too. So board of directors, working on board of directors, working as an executive director, that kind of thing. So that's sort of where my background lies. Before I even came to Denali, I worked with nonprofits. So that's love of DCC, but interest in nonprofits and how they run. So I'm gonna be asking the panelists some questions, and they'll each have about 10 minutes or so to talk. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but hopefully we can get through it all, and I'll sort of wave at them and give them a little minute of, your time is almost up. And then after that, as Carly said, we're gonna go into a little bit like, what's the future? Do things need to change a bunch, and how do we keep people involved and all that kind of thing as part of our discussion. So I think I will just start over here with the early years with Jerry Cole, and asking what was the most interesting or maybe memorable conservation issue that DCC worked on. And this goes all the way back to the 70s and early 80s, right, Jerry? And talk about what that was while you were on the board of the organization.
I just want to say thank you to the board and to Sue for giving me the opportunity to be the most historical. My how time just fly. Well, as was recalled last evening, when the Denali Citizens Council was founded in '74, it was the result of an existential moment in Alaska's history until late 1971, when the Native Land Claims Settlement Act was passed. Through 89% of Alaska's 375 million acres was still in federal ownership. So, in section 17 of ANCSA, Congress saw to it that a joint federal land use planning commission was established to undertake the massive land use planning that was going to have to go on and make a report to Congress, its final report to Congress, in 8 years' time. And that was to settle 44 million acres that were going to Alaska's corporations, native corporations, 104 million acres that the state had never selected, but was guaranteed its statehood. And then to comply with section 17D2 of ANCSA, there was up to 80 million acres that needed to be studied for inclusion in one of the 4 federal preservation systems. That was a lot of work. Exactly. You wonder how it all could get done. Before the act was even passed, the agencies actually created their own task forces because they were concerned about about beginning to figure out what of the lands of Alaska that were really the most important for them to hang on to. And then at the same time, there was a federal state land use planning commission that was organized with both federal representatives and state representatives and native representatives to look at all of this for Congress. And they had to report in these 8 years, whereas the federal agencies had all of 90 days to get back to the Secretary of the Interior with this list of the lands that they wanted. Concurrently, in 1970, the Alaska Coalition, which was a consortium of the nation's conservation organizations, was founded to lobby for a robust expansion of federal preservation lands and also protect a native right to subsistence. As for DCC, it was yet another organization that was established. And ironically, it was the only advocacy organization of all of the national parks that existed in Alaska. It was the only one that was sort of singled out because a few people evidently thought it was important that this particular national park be represented. Nobody really knows who the prime mover was. And it was likely some of the members of the Alaska Coalition. And Stan and Pat Center are here. Pat was on the original board of the of DCC, and Stan, you were working with the Alaska Coalition in DC. What do you think was the most important reason that the coalition might have been interested to see DCC as an organization?
Well, everyone knew about what was then McKinley Park, and everyone also knew that it needed to be bigger, and that whole idea that the wildlife populations of the park ranged far outside its boundaries at that time. That was a big deal. And so the Alaska Coalition, of course, addressed the whole sweep of all the D2 lands, but there was probably no single piece of it better known in Congress than McKinley Park. And so that became certainly a centerpiece.
And much more accessible.
And much more accessible.
I think they were also interested in having local people lobbying for these lands, and so having a local organization come up with recommendations was very important.
So it wasn't just hired guns from, like at the time I worked for the Wilderness Society as their Alaska representative, but I didn't have deep roots here. So it needed local voices.
So the original meetings of the Denali Citizens Council were held in Cantwell at the home of Everett Drashner. Who remembers the name Everett Drashner? Quite a few people. Well, he was then a Cantwell school bus driver, but he had some political chops that had been furnished as Sergeant at Arms for the Alaska State Senate. And Frank Norris, in his administrative history of the park, noted that in late April of 1974, in the midst of the public hearings process, a group of 30 Alaskans who were, quote, honestly concerned and interested in protecting the unique values of McKinley Park and the region surrounding it, met at Cantwell and organized themselves as the Denali Citizens Council. Directors were chosen at the meeting and included residents of Cantwell, of Lake Minshumina, Deniki Lakes, and Hurricane. I don't remember who was living at Hurricane, as well as Anchorage and Fairbanks. Pete Martin, who remembers the name of Pete Martin. Pete Martin, none of us remembered who the first acting president of the board was, but he was a park and municipal planner in Anchorage, and he was elected as the acting chair. So early on, and I'm digressing here, but this is kind of fun history about how it all came to be, right? Early on, the Drashner homestead became a little too small for these 30 people. And some of them were coming from Anchorage and Fairbanks. So for whatever reason, we were living at Deniki Lakes. Our house was maybe the biggest house at the time in the area. So the big house, it was, no longer. The big house became the place where these, they were sometimes monthly meetings, if not, every other month. And there were families with kids, there were couples, there were individuals. They all gathered at our house for an entire weekend.
Wow.
It was great. You could not walk on any patch of the floor in the evening after the sleeping bags had gotten spread out. And as I recall, we had meetings on Saturday mornings. They came up Friday night. Meetings were held on Saturday mornings so that once the day warmed up enough, everybody was putting on skis to go outside and have fun. And I think we did conduct business, but it was as brief as possible in order to be able to enjoy just being, for those people to be up at the park. And there was potluck food, and I can remember to this day, Claudia Martin's cinnamon pull-aparts.
Another minute.
Another minute, huh?
Yes.
So I do recall that there may have been some other park-specific business that was important at the time. The park's highway had opened, the shuttle system had been instituted, and there were some some other things that were already going on besides ANILCA, but obviously the Alaska Native Land Claim Settlement Act and the National Interest Lands Act were the most important features that DCC was established for. And as a matter of fact, its mission was specific at that time. It was to involve itself and advocate for the expansion of Mount McKinley National Park.
And we have other questions, but I'm going to go down the line then everybody will answer that same question. What was the most interesting or memorable conservation issue that DCC worked on, Henry, while you were on the board?
So,
if you remember.
yeah, into the 1980s and beginning of the 1990s, and there wasn't just one issue. There was a flood of issues.
Yeah.
There were, the old historic hotel burned down in 1972. They just put in a temporary hotel. Other people said, let's tear that down and build a grand lodge in the park. There were people in Fairbanks saying, we need another north road. We're going to build a north road along Stampede, connecting Cantition, and now we'll have a big giant loop through the park. Other pilots were saying the airstrip in Cantition is too small. We need a big airstrip. The list goes on and on and on. And we were like pulling our hair out, like, how do we deal with all of these proposals and issues? And the Secretary of Interior, Bruce Babbitt, the head guy, he's the boss of the National Park Service director. The head guy said, this is crazy, all these proposals. What we need is a group of people to get together and develop a long-range integrated future plan. So we formed the Denali Task Force in 1994. There were 16 of us, included someone from Atna, Siri, the tourism companies, and several environmental groups, and Department of Transportation. So this was a big group, and I thought, we're just going to sit down and argue and never come up with any good solutions. But we really did. We found there were a lot of things that we could come into agreement on. Some of the big issues, North Road, thumbs down. We didn't build that. Hotel, we said there's plenty of the private sector is perfectly capable of building adequate accommodations for visitors outside the park. We don't need a hotel in the park. We achieved that several years later. The Park Service took out the hotel. We said there's inadequate visitor facilities here. We just had a little trailer for it. There really wasn't a visitor center. Several years after our recommendation, they built a big visitor center, and we also recommended educational facilities. They did that as well. So we achieved a lot. And many of our recommendations were endorsed. But one of the things we were saying, there was just too much emphasis on the Park Road. You need to give people a variety of different options. There's a variety of different visitors. I drove a bus from 1975 to 83, and there were many times there were visitors. I could tell they just really weren't that happy on this long bus ride. I said, well, why did you get on it? And it said, I was told this was the only way to see the park. That's the wrong answer. There's a lot of ways to see this park. So the Denali Task Force was invited by the state park director to go out to the state park, and not everybody went, but several of us did. And we drove out to the end of the Petersville Road, went on about a 2-hour hike, and we were right there at the base of the Tokasitna Glacier. What a fantastic view. We saw no other hikers, no permit required. I think even today, you probably could go out there, you don't even need a permit. And that is certainly a view very comparable to Eielson or Wonder Lake. It's different, but it's really at that level. And we said, yeah, this would be an incredible place for a visitor center. But that hasn't happened. It takes a lot of cooperation. Department of Transportation didn't have money to upgrade the Petersville Road, and it takes cooperation between the Park Service and the state park system and many others. And trying to do a joint funded project is very difficult. But still looking for the future, those are good options. Provide other options other than going out the Park Road. So people have different options. Another thing we said about the Park Road, we came to agreement that maintain the relatively primitive character of the road. In other words, don't keep upgrading it to federal highway standards. And there's a correlation between vehicle weight and the design of the road. And if you keep putting on vehicles that are too heavy, you are in an endless cycle of maintenance because the road was not designed for that. The road was originally designed in the late 1920s and built in the 30s. The park got a great deal on it because that was during the Depression. That was an all-time low. Labor and materials were at all-time low. We got a great deal on that. Now we're building this bridge in a time of inflation. We're paying top dollar for it. So it's important to understand this, but we keep putting on bigger buses. If you have a limitation on bus vehicles, the way around that, put a bigger bus with more capacity. That's more weight, and that changes the design of the road. Even if you're not intending to change the design of the road, this ongoing maintenance, you end up building it up higher and building it wider. That just happens through the cycle of maintenance. So what we were saying, you need, instead of modifying the road to meet the vehicles of the future need to be modified to accommodate the road. So,
Great, Henry, thanks. And next. So what, Linda, was the most interesting or memorable conservation issue that DCC worked on while you were on the board?
Okay, first I want to mention that my first DCC meeting was at the Cole House, and I first came here in 74, so it was probably, I don't know, 75 or 76. And you guys were also cool, and I was young and new, but anyway, you had a big influence on me. So actually, Henry and I overlapped on the board quite a bit, and I was president of the board for a year. He was president for a while, then I was like in 92, 93, so we might have been a little out of sequence. And you mentioned a few things that I'm going to go into a little more detail about, but so then Russ Berry was superintendent of the park, and I'm assuming some of you remember who that was and others don't, but so the Denali Citizens Council first mission statement, as I recall, you can help me out. It's something like to protect maybe something like the wilderness values of McKinley National Park and its environs. I just remember the term and its environs. Well, by the early 90s, its environs were becoming more important. We had maybe focused the organization focused on the park and Anilta earlier on, but the environs, partly because there's an increase in a local community that was starting to have a voice in what was going on around them. The Village Use subdivision up here had
the land lottery was in 1984, and so then more and more people were starting to find homes here and out on the Stampede. Well, actually, that was integral to my story, but I didn't want to leave you Stampede. And so, and also growth of businesses, like by the early 90s, there was about close to 1,000 rooms available outside of the park for in outside businesses. Well, a lot of those employees were finding places to camp up and around Hornet Creek and Dragonfly Creek. There were a lot of squatters camps. There ended up being a lot of trash. I mean, friends of mine who tented up there too. I mean, they're all nice people, but they didn't always clean up when they left for the season. And so DCC was involved in helping change that. And there was a coalition of people, and DNR ended up creating, I think it's called a special use area, that along the Parks Highway in the canyon, and then down here near, in this area near McKinley Village, no camping allowed anymore. And also DCC helped influence the Park Service to require park contractors, specifically the bus contract, to have housing locally, have housing for their employees, or require them to live locally. And that was a big change. Up until then, you could kind of go anywhere and camp in the hills. And so that was one of the very local issues. Let's see, so and also, there's a big cleanup of the Hornet Creek area. A lot of local businesses were involved and helped clean it up, and then boulders were put across the path so no one else could go up there. And let's see, we are also, so a lot of what I felt like I did, I was only president for about a year, maybe a year and a half, was meeting with Russ Berry, who was the superintendent, and then eventually Linda Toms, who was the assistant superintendent. And Linda was a little more friendly to us, but she couldn't really admit it. But Russ Berry wasn't, and he kind of acted like he wasn't really taking it seriously. But I met with him, and we did a lot of the ongoing stuff of being president, like position papers, or writing to him, or meeting with him, or going to public hearings. And so a couple other things were, we're really trying to get the shuttle was VTS facility moved back into the park. That was also the era of Mayflower being out on the highway, and that's partly why so many people moved down to Hornet Creek to live. Also, we were a voice for closing illegal dumps and encouraging the borough to develop waste management systems. That was a lot to do with Henry, because that was kind of his specialty. But meanwhile, in the park itself, we always tried to have a voice in road issues. And so it's just been ongoing since the start of the road, I'm sure, the road issues. So we were promoting a road corridor wildlife study. There have been a couple done in 1973 and 86, but there are still continuing pressures to allow more access and to widen the road. And businesses wanted more access. The Denali Natural History Tour had started, I don't know what year.
91 or 92.
Okay, 91 or 92. And Primrose is being developed as a kind of a destination, but it was like a destination without a plan. There'd never been environmental assessment. I might be using that term incorrectly, Steve. EA or EIS or one of those. And so we were always asking for management studies to kind of have a plan of what was going to happen there. Meanwhile, the McGrath Conditioner Road scoping was happening, and we had a board member who was very involved in checking in on that. And again, more pressure from private industry wanting more access. And lots of Alaskans and state officials saw, or maybe still see, the park as kind of an economic engine, or they felt it should be, or the golden goose, that maybe there could be more business development. Anyway, one big development plan that Henry mentioned, but I just think this is kind of a good story. So I kind of didn't say one most important thing, because DCC often had a voice in things, but we can't say we had like a big win, like, oh, this was us, we changed this, or we can say we influenced, we were a voice, we helped other people, but we weren't just one, one winner. So one big development plan that ended up being a big scandal was the park hotel that was really promoted by, and was this park superintendent, Russ Berry, and he really wanted to make this a mainstream national park. And so the park hotel that had burned down in 72, there was always this plan that it might be replaced, but it was never a plan in any plans that I know of.
Right.
And it was always talked about, and maybe it should just be replaced on the same footprint. There was always that Park Hotel that some of you knew was supposed to be temporary. When I came in 74, was 2 years old, that temporary hotel, when we were hearing, this will just be here a couple more years, we're
The rail
building a new,
cars.
yeah, we're building a new hotel, the rail cars and those
Yeah.
modular units. Well, that went on until, that continued to exist until the early 90s.
2000, is it like two?
Okay, well, yes, but the decision not to continue
Oh, right,
was in the early, but I think, so Russ Berry was really for it. He was kind of in bed with Aramark, and it's not exactly clear what they were both thinking, but he wanted to really help them out and do things customized for them, and maybe he thought, you know, to throw him a little bone of like, maybe he was thinking something bigger. He thought he might be able to keep Princess out by helping Aramark have a big hotel in the park. But anyway, the whole financial situation wasn't gonna work out. There's a lot of questioning of it behind the scenes. And other park employees, not the superintendent, other park employees who wish to remain unnamed, were very instrumental in feeding information to interested local conservation. They were able to kind of help let other people and organizations know about it. And then. Yeah. Was pretty instrumental, but he was just here in the area yesterday. But anyway, so. Yes. Anyway, so the park, so Washington finally got enough of a take on what was happening that they sent a so-called auditor to come and find out what was going on. And this auditor was, I'm not supposed to mention her name. Someone orchestrated a meeting with the auditor and an inside NPS employee to really get a 10-minute speech on what was going on. And that auditor went back to DC, and the Inspector General's report came out that said, there's no way this should ever happen financially, environmentally, and for every other reason. This is a bad idea. But the big killer of it was, by then there were enough rooms outside the park. We no longer needed a park hotel, and the park hotel was thought to just benefit private industry or maybe wealthy people that could afford an increasingly probably expensive hotel. And the environmentalist point of view, the reason we were all against that park hotel was it's just another way that commercial interests were trying to have a bigger presence at the expense of the public. And so because that park hotel idea was just killed completely by 92, Ted Stevens had helped fund the study for it and support it, but he announced he was withdrawing support. It was over. And that allowed the opening of the first development concept plan for the front country and that area of the hotel, it was a hotel, that are now public facilities like the visitor center and the trails. And I mean, you could maybe question the extent of all that, but that's a different issue. But I'd say that was maybe the more interesting one of those. I think, okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, and that, then we'll go on to Nancy too, and then we'll sort of go through, there's, you know, the most important function, but Nancy, what was the most interesting, memorable one issue that on?
You know, it's hard to go with one, Sue, but, you know, what I see in this panel, and they're all old friends of mine and people who were around when I first came, because it was in 71 or 72.
No, you were first around, sorry. You were around before us too.
Well, so you didn't come, you came in 74, that's right.
You were there already. No, sorry.
I was around, that's true,
Okay.
but it seems like 3 or 4 years doesn't mean anything now.
It doesn't.
So we all came in the 70s, and enthusiasm, a lot of people who were interested in conservation wanted to live next to a national park, wanted to work in a national park, wanted to spend their holidays, their weekends hiking in a national park. That was the spirit in those days. And that was in the efflorescence of the environmental movement, as Jerry pointed out, in the 70s and 80s. And as Kim pointed out last night in his talk, the passage of a whole bunch of really strong environmental regulation happened in the 70s and 80s, and then Milka capped it with the conservation system units in Alaska. So there was a lot of optimism, you know, who better to manage this land than the Park Service, because they had these wilderness values. But as time goes by and national parks exist in time, entrepreneurialism and the advance of time, the growth of visitorship. This presents new problems which were part of my tenure since 2000. And these new problems, some of them are just excruciatingly detailed and some of them are pretty big. So of course we continued with the Park Road, maintaining the character, maintaining the value of shuttle, the inexpensiveness of shuttle, making sure the allocation was not going over toward tour too much because that's the one that makes the concessionaire money, all that kind of thing. That continued, and to this day is what we think is very important about our role in the park, to be sure that that bus system is well managed to preserve resources. But a couple of other things that came up. When I first was in DCC, the whole issue of whether you could snow machine in a national park came up. And of course, the additions of the park were added in 1980. And many people said that Anilka gave them a different flair. There was the Alaska differences, the Alaska exceptions. You could do more in park additions than you could do in the core wilderness. And so the park did run a regulation that prohibited snow machining in the core wilderness. That was in 2000, and that has held. But we tried to help the Park Service to come to the conclusion that recreational snow machining was really not allowed in Anilka lands. It was snow machining for traditional activities. Then there was this big argument, what is a traditional activity? And travel between villages, consumptive lifestyle, but is it high marking? Is it running down the road with high snow, high horsepower snow machines? Is that what traditional activities is? And that discussion is happening to this day. And I would say that we probably lost the additions, but that was a big struggle when I was first in DCC. Also, Spruce 4, and some of you in this room remember Spruce 4, which was an in-holding issue where some guys bought land from a mining claim on Spruce Creek, which is on Moose Creek out in the Kantishna, and wanted the Park Service to build them a road because Anilka guarantees access. So again, one of those Anilka diddly details that comes up through time, should the Park Service buy build a road for these people just because they have access because they own this in-holding. So there was a whole EIS process done, and it turned out the Park Service spent way more than they should have purchasing these in-holdings, but at least we don't have a road up Moose Creek. But this access to in-holdings issue still pertains in Kantishna, still could draw unreasonable numbers of tourism vehicles, could crowd the road. That's still an issue out there in Kantishna. I'd say we did a guarded win on that. And then the issue of the stampede, which is this combination of gateway and in-park issue, because as was recognized with the founders, the animals in the park needed more space because they venture out into lands around the park. So enlarge the park and you improve habitat. And of course it did, but the little 3 townships in the stampede area, which is that weird cutout, were already state land, already patented state land, and couldn't be selected. The state wasn't going to give them back. And so although it was a big discussion with the Land Use Planning Commission, we lost. And there was this promise or, note or something in Congress that the Park Service would work toward doing a land trade to reacquire the stampedes. But there was some interest in the stampede. There was the north access interest, there were development interest, and there were fishing game interest. And that never did occur. So that was sort of a loss in a sense, but I will say that DCC, by working with the state of Alaska through the years, has been able to get designations for the state lands in the Wolf Townships that say it's for habitat and dispersed recreation. And we don't have large developments in the Stampede Townships. DCC tried to get a state recreation area established. There was a bill. We worked with some legislators from Fairbanks. But it got, that not everybody in Healy agreed with us that that was something you need to do, even though most state recreation areas allow a lot of dispersed recreation and they have local advisory committees. So it seemed like a great idea to us that local people could manage their future, but there wouldn't be a road to Kantishna there, because a road to Kantishna would just become, an arrow into the heart of the park that would spawn all kinds of development that shouldn't happen. So I would say that third thing was stampede. And, as Linda mentioned, our wins are guarded, our losses are plentiful, but, I think that we bring a tone, and that tone is very important.
Thank you. And I think I'll just, these next couple questions, I'll just throw them out and anybody can answer. If you have a thought on the most important role DCC played over the last 50 years. That's a lot of time to think about. But is there somebody who has a thought?
I'll go ahead and tackle that one. I know that, Pete Martin, made the statement pretty early on, you know, that this national park was on the verge of major development. And that a locally based organization was needed that would create a flow of information that would help shape the destiny of the park. So that was early.
Yeah.
And, I think that's the case today. Public communication and education about the national park and regional land use policy issues has been DCC's most important work. And I think that perhaps it can, you know, it has a couple of functions here. One of them is being a historian of borough and park policies that interpret how events and planning documents of the past have influenced the present and how they might influence how we may choose to view the collective future of this area. And then the other one that you mentioned was being an advocate for National Park Service positions when the agency cannot speak out.
Yeah, and I think being a watchdog overall is what has been most important and could still be into the future. And just today, a park employee told a pretty big group of us that when they have sent out consultation letters about some issue coming up, DCC has been, and this is just in recent times, one of the few organizations or people that respond. And they said that it really helps them remember that they can't just do whatever they want to. And I mean, that sounds kind of weird, the park doing whatever they want to. Overall, I'm for the park. Most of us are. We like the Park Service, but sometimes, you know, they need some other input. And so just today is the reminder that it matters to have this other local voice. So please join the board or something.
And we played such a big role in reviewing all of the documents and the planning, the general management plan, the front country plan, on and on, and trying to do it in a broad understanding of how it all fits together, rather than just individual proposals popped up.
And I'll just go back to the tone you set.
Yeah, the tone.
And not needing to win. And not necessarily even needing to be absolutely right, but having a sense of what your basic values are is important.
Yeah, a voice.
Last question was the biggest challenge with your time on the board, but I think instead I'll just say, in your perception, what is the biggest challenge we face now? Because there are a heck of a lot of challenges over the last 50 years, but the biggest challenge facing us today. That could be anything broad, I guess.
The challenge of dealing with increased visitation at the same time protecting the park and minimizing the impact and finding ways to do that, to provide a quality visitor opportunities without impacting the park in a negative way.
Which has really been the thing that we've all tried to do in different ways all along the way. Yeah, still is.
Well, I think I'll open it to the floor too, to have one.
Yeah, I think some of it is just the sense of a certain sense of futility about values that some of us had when we were here in those halcyon days of not over visitation, not over commercialization, and a genuine interest that NPS folk had in their own park, that they would go with their families out biking on the park road, that they would want to stay and live in the community. And of course, that can't be expected. The park was young, now it's in its middle years, and the kind of changes that happen, then the local community has grown. When I first moved here, I think there were about 50 people living in the entire area, including Park Service and the local community, and that was certainly many, many times larger. And when you get larger communities, you also get that more fragmentation of the reason why people are here. And not everyone is here to stay their life, to put down roots and enjoy the place for a long time. And maybe don't have that interest in developing a close relationship with the issues. Having relationships with issues, big ideas are great on social media, big assertions are great on social media, but the work is hard. And it involves reading and listening and going to meetings and writing and submitting, being in front of the deadline. And a lot of that when you're dealing with planning and big documents and big ideas. And it involves being open to talking to people and hearing them tell you that you have the wrong idea and inviting them to help you get a better one. So it is hard work. And we don't, the board has not really had this 1, 2, 3 mission for many years. We expect that a new member of our board would bring us new ideas. And for me, I feel that we may need to change our bylaws and term out. And maybe a board member would term out and then could come back. But I think we need to find a way to infuse our organization with fresh blood that's in the bylaws, So people like me don't hang on, by our fingertips for years and years. Not that I don't like the work, I love the work and I love the commitment and I love the mission. But I acknowledge, I may not have that many more days and that there need to be younger people in this. So we need to maybe build it into our administrative structure to get younger people or other people involved in our organization. We can talk about that. But, those are the challenges now that we have a totally different community now. And we have lots of different goals and different missions within our community and many different attitudes about the Park Service, some of them quite cynical. So we deal with that now. And so to join a board of, diamond-eyed idealists or, perceived to be diamond-eyed, we're not idealists anymore. Maybe we're perceived as that, and people think, oh, they have to have a certain attitude about everything in order to be on our board. A purity? No, but I think we still see we have a room.
I think that, you get an advocacy organization like this one that is focused on an individual national park in a community that has a small population, in a state that has a small population. Every NGO in this state has the same issues. There aren't enough people to fill board seats. And there's not enough income being generated from simply membership to be able to hire somebody to come in and find grant funding opportunities. And so it becomes a chicken and egg kind of dilemma that you face, that you never feel like you're able to accomplish the mission that you really believe in. So that's a downside, isn't it, to becoming a board member? Yeah. And I don't mean to put that in negative terms, but it's a reality. But look, it's a reality that every nonprofit organization faces. So
that's actually the next part of our conversation, which is opening it up to everybody and talking about what's really, so a question out to the audience and to the panel too, but why is DCC important to you, and what would you miss if it didn't even exist? And some of the other issues as well, which is what is the role of DCC and how should it change, and is conservation issues that they've changed, and what should DCC be focused on in the future? So I open that up to people who want to talk. And yes,
I'm Pam Miller, and I think the issue I think about is how does the whole environmental community and your organization find a way to build programs that bring young people in with a feeling of being part of something, having responsibility, and that uses digital power for advocacy, but is in the heart level. And I'll just give one anecdote. Ginny Wood and Celia Hunter formed Camp Denali, and along with Ginny's husband at the time. And I ended up cleaning out the attic in Ginny's house after she passed away. And there were all the old index card file of every visitor who ever came to Camp Denali, the Christmas card list, who got sent the Camp Denali newsletter, and it all fed into Anilka and their work on Anilka. And we have different ways of doing that, but it was all very personal, and we don't have time for all the personal anymore. But very small networks can make a difference. And I think the experiential part of Denali, Camp Denali, is the workers can feed into that, but the visitors are in a different echelon in these days. And it was kind of that way back then too. So I guess that challenge for everybody is, what do we do having a YCC for the conservation environmental organizations, some kind of youth conservation force that maybe organizations. That's my big picture view.
Does the role of DCC have to change in the next 10 years, 50 years?
Not if it's still the watchdog for the park. For the service, that is the job.
And if that's the case, what I see when I look around is who are those people who are going to be involved?
Exactly.
Just what you said too, this panel said that. Okay, who are the people? Because this board is, we turned out, man, we're done with this. And I would say, I totally agree with term limits and rewriting bylaws to make sure that the organization continues on, even though it sounds really scary if, oh my God, well, what do we do if so-and-so isn't around or whatever, but that's how organizations continue really strongly, is by having term limits. And we can talk about term limits on a lot of things, but it's really, really important. So that there is fresh new people and new ideas, and oh, maybe we need to add something into the mission statement, or change our purpose slightly, or whatever we do. And
It wouldn't hurt to have requirements for a board member.
yeah,
That would force the board to go to recruitment.
or certainly, yeah, qualifications of some kind, maybe a native, and do all sorts of things with those bylaws and require and look for those people. A whole matrix of people that you should have on it, especially in an app.
I think part of what happened, I've been involved also with the last diversity association. And people became comfortable with our generation doing the work. I finally realized that maybe what had happened was the last generation moved away and force the next generation to start moving in. All kinds of things. There are festivals that are no longer being kept because our generation got tired and retired and no one else filled that position. It just need to be more nurturing and bringing people in. Like, I think Florence Collins is probably responsible for bringing us.
I was kind of surprised to not hear, and I apologize if I missed it, but I didn't hear anyone explicitly speak about climate change. And I wonder how you think and how others in the room think about looking towards the future, and because of the global nature of that challenge and reality that we are all living in, who do we need to be at the table with, and who is DCC specifically not, who is this community and this organization not in conversation with, that we should be, in terms of localizing some of the solutions we should be thinking about.
Earlier today, some of us were actually talking about that, just bringing up climate change or the climate crisis and how that can relate to Denali, but we didn't come up with any answers. So it does, if there's a way to use that as an inroad, because I think that having a really compelling issue that would speak to more people again, other generations, because it does come down to a generational issue for a lot of reasons. So how to, is it, yeah, just how to talk about that, or, you know, how do we talk about that?
Was that one of the questions? that you
I'm
talked
asking
about?
you.
Oh,
No, we
I
didn't
mean-
come up with it, just kind of, because
I mean,
I
I think
think
we have to
DCC
talk
is
about it
pretty
in
local.
community
Yeah.
in a way, like Pam said, like a community that extends beyond our geographical community and into maybe all kinds of ways we might imagine
We
that.
all have huge concerns about climate crisis and global, maybe some of us are activists on about other things to do with that, but really, how do you, is there something as, because DCC is more of a local, it's a specific organization, it's not about global issues, but about protecting Denali, the park and the environs. So is there something that can be done here that does relate to climate change? I just, you know, I just kind of get stuck when I try to think of it, and I think other people do too. Yeah, I didn't mean to call you. Yours that monitor for it.
You know, that's why it's here. We're having a conversation.
Rocks.
Yes.
Climate change.
Right. Yes.
Hi, I'm Joe Frankovich, and, you know, I agree, when you said, what's the biggest issue facing the park, and climate change, is the first thing that came to my mind. And I think Denali does have a role to play. I'm not sure it's DCC's role, but maybe we can have it, but, I also work for a small tour company, and my personal goal is every visitor that I come in contact with to tell them that Alaska has a story to tell. We're warming up twice as fast as anywhere else in the United States, the Arctic 4 times as much. And Denali totally has a story to tell with Pretty Rocks. So ideally, every visitor that comes here should have a basic primer on climate change and how it's affecting their experience here in the park. That's more a frontline interpreter bus driver maybe, but maybe there is a role for DCC there. I don't know. I think it's an important story to tell, and I think Denali totally has a role in telling that story to visitors and whomever.
So I think that Nan should be here because Nan really had the strongest message about climate change when we did our essays earlier on this year about Pretty Rocks, when she said that, you know, the carbon footprint of cruise ship based tourism is a blight on the climate, and why do we continue to encourage it? Maybe we should just close the road. Maybe the road will continue to be a big expense as things fall in after Pretty Rocks. And are we feeding the cruise ship tourism monster by guaranteeing them this road to have this wilderness experience that may not be registering in the way it should be? The more you crowd the road and the more experience is confined to video, and in order to act, we'd have to influence our senators, our representatives. It would be a huge political issue to say that, you know, this park's being run the wrong way for the climate, the way we're bringing people from all over the world who are riding in jets or in these very a carbon high footprint cruise ships, although some people would say that maybe the cruise ships have less of a carbon footprint than if everybody on them drove up in a car, but we also know that probably not everybody on them would drive up in a car. So it's a complicated issue, but I think Nan should be here because she states it even better. And it was very strong in that statement about, should we really start repairing something that is so wounded and will fail again? Should we? And it's an important question to ask.
But it's a big question. It's one of these existential questions.
It is an existential question.
And, you know, Denali's Citizens Council has much more been in its history, issue oriented. What is happening at the time, rather than looking into the future about the things around us that we know are happening. Is it something that an organization like this should put its arms around and have a voice for? But that takes a lot of strategic thinking.
And it sounds like there's a Zoom question.
Yeah, well, a Zoom comment, coming in from one of the many participants on Zoom, from Dave Shirkauer. The park's biggest challenge is the effects of a rapidly warming climate, but DCC's biggest challenge has to do with capacity, efficiency, focus on big audacious goals, and engaging the next generation. DCC is not about solving climate change, rather how the park will adapt, manage, and tell the story. Jeff Bowman also writes, he has a few comments here. If true, that's a profound disappointment. I wouldn't have said much, but 2 to 3 minutes of how wonderful it is to see and hear Jerry and Henry and Linda and Nancy, and imagining others likely there, such as Kim and Steve Carwile. A little bit about my tenure from the late 70s to mid 80s. I would have highlighted DCC's role in the village view land use resolution and plugging into statewide environmental organizations and initiatives. Please convey my heartfelt feelings to all who might remember. Anyway, so that he covered more than just right on topic, but Jeff Bowman really wanted to be here and is really bummed he couldn't be.
I want to start Lois Epstein. I have worked for several NGOs and worked a lot on transportation and still consult. But I wanted to thank DCC very strongly because I love the oversight role and I know I can't spend enough time myself on these issues. But I did have a real question, and maybe because I don't spend enough time in the area, but my perception is that to go to Denali, it's either very expensive or there's camping and there's not so much of a middle ground. And you guys talked about how the private sector made the hotel rooms available. And, you know, I'm sure there are lots of other options now, but is that a real problem is my first question. And the second comment I have is there are so many groups in the lower 48 now that are people of color hikers and, you know, a variety of organizations like that, that if they had the opportunity to spend time up here, I'm sure they would jump and jump at it. And I know that costs money, but maybe that's the kind of dedicated effort to bring more diverse younger people up here that might pay off in the long run in terms of future board membership and people who, can become more active. So that's a number of thoughts. I just wanted to get it in all at once, but thank you again.
And I know I remember using internal combustion engines for dealing with climate change. And what I'm hearing is we're bringing perhaps too many people to the park. We've reached capacity, which is my opinion as well. And so I wonder if the conversation is actually revolving around limiting. How do we limit? Because if we're talking cruise ships, we're talking buses and trains, bringing the majority of people up here, we're taking them into the park on buses. We're talking mass transportation for the whole thing. I don't know how you cut that down anymore. I work in Yosemite. You can see the haze from not only the campfires at the west end of the east end of the valley. You can see it where the cars have been traveling in and out all day long, the traffic jams, the grid. We don't have that. And so I think what it boils down to is how do you determine who gets to come to the park and who doesn't? Because I think we're reaching the limits on how much we can put into the park. and how many people can be buried, and I think that's a difficult discussion to have.
Amen.
Maybe this goes back to trying to recruit younger folks. And I don't know, you may already be doing this, but possible presentations at the local schools and even, schools in Talkeetna and maybe Fairbanks, like, just like a little session and advertisement and what is DCC all about? And maybe it would spur young people to be more interested, mentoring them really young.
Yeah, there's Melanie and Kim have the same issue with an organization they're working with too. How do you get younger people involved, and what is it that would spur or spark their interest? So you have questions?
I was just gonna say, you said he does have a client history. This is
Yeah.
or you were saying. Maybe that.
Oh,
About trying to limit the number of people that are coming into the park. Because of the short road, we have very little overlining there. Because of the short road, Park Service really did kind of say, okay, this is the number of us. And we have to put more space between those buses because we have a short road. And so what the bus drivers are finding is, and what they lobbied for a long time, is more space. We need more space. We're too crowded out there. It's not a good experience for anybody. So now we have proof that this is a better experience for everybody. It's better for the park by far. And so we're pushing very hard on a daily basis, saying when that road opens up, you guys, Park Service and the concessionaire, they both have control of these massive cruise ship people who push for more and more and more. So now they've got control of them. And that was it last year, Scott, but this year it's not happening. They tried to steamroll it, say, we're coming in anyway. They overbooked the TWTs every single day. And finally, because Park Service said, this is how many TWTs are going out there and we're not going to make any more go out there, they had to say no. You oversold. Now, did Aramark take the huge brunt for that? They sure did. They got a bad rap on it, but it wasn't it wasn't Aramark that oversold. It was those big companies. And so now they know, okay, we can't push it. We're not going to get it. We have to deal with putting our people on a different avenue to see the park. And so if we can keep on the Park Service and the concessionaire, once that road reopens, to keep the control that we have right now, once the road opens, because I think that once the road opens all the way, they're going to think, oh, we can do this again. But we have somebody in the administration at Park Service that isn't about the dollar now. And I think that that's one of the things that DCC can really do, is kind of, that might be our issue when that road opens all the way, is to keep the control minimal, I will admit, minimal control that we have now, to keep that park from being completely overbooked.
So, question to you, Nancy, is the vehicle management plan still relevant with this new dynamic of a shortened road experience?
Nancy might have a better idea.
The vehicle management plan from the very beginning had to make some changes because they weren't able to implement all the studies and all the little technology that they had intended to implement to follow the buses. So it's been a compromise from the very beginning. And you have to remember that they set in place these standards and indicators to show whether or not the experience on the road was suffering, which they considered that to be a resource as the visitor experience. And then they had some wildlife studies planned that didn't happen to determine whether or not the animals responded. And so then now, Pretty Rocks came along, so that has changed the whole thing. They are still monitoring, but I don't believe, and I don't know if there's anyone from Park Service that could answer this question. I don't believe they have a lot of money to do the rest stop monitoring. It's pretty much volunteers with clipboards. And so to find out whether or not there are too many buses at a rest stop or whatever. And you guys probably are out there and you see whether there's crowding at a bus stop. You get trained to move on if you were too many crowds at buses at a wildlife stop and all that. You have training to move on within those parameters. But without the long road, everything gets compressed.
Right.
So they're still putting out data. But our big problem with the vehicle management plan, it didn't seem to protect resources as much as it protected visitor experience. And, visitors that come to Alaska, as soon as they're outside Wasilla and there's a bunch of trees on either side of the road, they think they're in wilderness. So I often feel that, the visitor experience is an okay indicator, but it's more of an indicator for a more urban area that there needs to be a little bit more consideration of noise, the weight of the buses that Henry was talking about, some factors that didn't really even get considered in the vehicle management plan. I'm guessing that once the road is reconnected, if that in fact happens, they'll probably need to do an amendment to make it relevant.
Well, then maybe DCC can use that as a focal point to influence a rewrite or an amended vehicle management plan based on what Nancy's describing as a whole different experience dynamic.
I
And
think
now
they
you have
intended to
data.
get the traffic in the vehicle management plan, but that just didn't happen.
These guys can say whether this is happening there, but at the end, in 2021, when we were still driving a long road, I would get asked pretty much every single day, how many buses are out here? Now, maybe they don't recognize that it's a wilderness, but they did recognize there's a lot of buses out here. How many buses are out here? And I would get asked every day. I don't get asked that anymore. Once in a while, if we get backed up on top of each other for whatever reason, somebody was late, somebody got caught in the sheet gap too long, whatever, we get backed up on each other, I'll get the question. But if everything goes smoothly, which it almost does daily now, I don't get asked that question anymore.
What would be very interesting is to develop a way to get some statistics on visitor satisfaction on going 43 miles rather than 65.
Are they doing that? Does anybody know if they're doing a survey of any kind and asking the visitors if the parts of it's a different?
I would think Sessioner would still have some kind of a visitor comment process, guest comment program with data that would be provided to Park Service.
Anecdotally, is it not true that visitors are more satisfied with a shorter run?
They like the shorter day in the park. They're disappointed by the things they don't see. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them are disappointed by the things they don't see.
Like the lower opportunities.
But that's across the board over the course of the summer. People are always dissatisfied with what they don't see, right?
No, but by the short road though, you take away, the percentage of the hospital.
There's no place for them to get out of except out mile 17, to get out of the bus and take a really significant picture of the mountain when it's out. And, but yeah, I think they want to see it, but not have to be in that seat then. So.
But as I stated on the bus with most of you, they seem to be perfectly happy and satisfied when they leave.
Yeah.
We're not hearing any complaints.
We hear your director.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or happier.
Yeah, so going back to the DCC future relevancy capacity, maybe this is a double-edged topic, but You know, I think if we look around the room, it's like the median age is what, 60 to 55 here in this group.
Speak for yourself.
So speaking to that, I think of all the people I've known who've been heavily involved in DCC and in park issues, they had a deep attachment to this area, which means, and it meant also that they had a home here, that they felt this was their home. Which brings me to the topic of housing inside the park. And right now, the real estate market is just, you know, you talk about gateway community issues, it's like worse, it's 10 times worse as far as real estate prices of someone wanting to make this their home. And if you want young people to get involved, young people can't afford housing. And right now, the borough is sitting on so much land that we're moving at a slower than a snail's pace to get it on the market. But it will go on the market, and if the borough stays with this extreme libertarian perspective, it's not necessarily going to be for affordable housing. It's going to go to absentee landowners and vacation homes and more commercial. So anyways, I think in the local real estate, like I know that DCC has struggled a little bit with, we just focused on park issues or local politics issues. And I think this is the local like a DCC future issue. If you want young people to be here, call this their home and really be attached to it, there needs to be affordable housing.
Well, I agree it is a snail's pace, but the borough is working on it, and
18 years ago, I was working on it.
it's getting a lot closer. And there's no process to get it into local hands now, but when it comes up to, there is land to be sold, there will be a process to try to get it into, you know, people who want to live on the land. I know that.
Yeah.
But you both bring up that point of, in the evolution of DCC from an organization that some people that didn't have a lot of coins in their jeans when they came up here and made a life were able to start that life and become pillars of the community and have an affordable lifestyle, but that is so much harder to have now. And they were also people who wanted to go into the park, recreate in the park. So it's a different gateway lifestyle now, or it's certainly a much more mixed gateway lifestyle. And we did get involved with zoning, but a couple of times we got kind of wounded by that. And so I think it's pretty hard because there's always somebody that's going to come out of the woodwork and say, you didn't ask me. And if they're Adna, then they're a whole country, right? So not that we're opposed to it, though. I think DCC has been in local politics almost since day one, just by default, because how can you not, you know? But it's a tough one, and we would need a couple of scruffy locals who want to get in there and be on our board and feed us information, and maybe a community organizer who would go to the meetings and take notes. And when we did have those people, like Hannah, for instance, we made more strides in local politics. But me living in Anchorage, I don't have any cred to get involved with local politics. I've gotten a little involved with this McKinley pit thing because I think that it's a statewide issue. If you have a gravel pit that's exhausted most of its resources and the local people would like to convert it to a local amenity area, there are ways to do this, and there are ways that you can get help from your state reps and so on. So an organization like DCC could help local groups with things like that, but a lot of the activism needs to begin in the community. And I think I'd like it if, you know, if we put out our phone number and local people knew to call us if they had an issue. And that maybe is not happening, but DCC could put posters up and say, got an issue with land management, got an issue with zoning, got an issue with park lifestyle, call us and come to our meetings and we'll talk about it. And maybe we should make our board meetings open on Zoom, like make them open, not just an executive meeting. So I think that if we put ourselves out there, I do think that maybe we could get some locals to trust us. I think the trust has diminished for some reason that I'm not sure why, but has. So maybe we need to put out feelers to pull that trust back.
So what about making a real concentrated push to? Is there like a general thing that? Like, I'm on a couple of other boards that, you know, like, this is how many minimum, this is the minimum amount of meetings, this is the exact timing, this is what's expected of you. You want to be on the board, we'd love to have you, but this is what we want from you. Perfect. That tells me what I can, you know, but yes. So if there was that, and then if you went to, like, say, all the local guide services, they are invested in this community, even if they may go somewhere else in the winter to guide, they're still the base. Here. And they're young and they're strong and they're full of vitality and they've got all that energy we used to have.
Need more. In other words, you're saying that the DCC should have,
yeah, like
invest in, well, not invest in community, but invest in, let's make an outward attempt to really
support
get
them.
You know, this is what a board member does and this is what we do.
Yeah.
Have more meetings, maybe have membership meetings once every other month or something.
Well, yeah, it's not only, like, for us, I don't think it's necessarily the amount of meetings, it's the intention, how much gets done in a meeting, you know, like, so that might be something to consider.
So as a current of a early 30s person, he is very concerned with climate change. He's very politically aware. He is socially responsible. He's empathetic. He's all the things that you want your kid to be. And him and his friends discuss climate change. They take a stand. They do what they can, but none of them are joiners. None of them. And and when I look across the board at my friends' children of the same age, it's the same thing. They're bright. They were raised by activists, but they are not.
Well, they know what it is.
They will not. I mean, if I tried to get him to join something like this, he'd look at me like I had 2 heads, like that. But he is very, very aware, and he does what he can do, and so do all of his friends. They do their part as individuals, but they are not joiners.
So that leads us to what is the role, how does DCC change and how do you do that?
Do you get them to be joiners, or is there a door? Are we looking at a different paradigm?
Like, we have to pay them. Like, is that, I mean, honestly, that's the next step.
What's on Mark and then?
Two different points, completely different, but I think the grading of the community is because many of us came here just after the highway was completed and know what the park was and can see what it's become. And so employees that come to work now, who are the ones that are going to have the vested interest, are seeing this industrial complex, and that's their starting point, and don't understand because they haven't experienced. And so I think it has to be explained how things can change, because I've noticed changes in the park. On the bus trip in today, we made a stop because there were a number of long-tailed Jaegers out in the Table Pass area. It used to be when you drove around Mount Margaret, there was a pair that you could rely on every day being there, kiting above the ground, looking for prey down below. There were foul ropes in the little ponds before you got to the pet clinic or rest. There were a lot of things that aren't there anymore that those of us that drove the road back then can, think back, oh yeah, that's different. The big ones, here and there, and there may be some more wolves now than when I started, but so we know. And I think with an apprenticeship program or something else where you're explaining the new ones coming in and giving them a little bit of help. The one question I have, perhaps more for current board members, is anything in the way of a development of a visitor center, and I don't know what kind of activities on the south side Is there any glowing ember there anymore, or is that pretty much, well, we tried and it didn't happen?
There's a whole plan,
There's no plan.
There still is.
but money has been an issue.
Because I think the Alaska Industrial, whatever, organization that gets the state money to finance the boondoggles is getting a little bit of, people are starting to look at how much money they're dumping on things that don't go anywhere, and I'm thinking they might need a project that gives them a little bit better rep. Are they able to, with whatever funds they've got,
No,
get them involved?
no.
Well, yeah, during the task force, we talked to the tour company people and they said, if you build a Southside Visitor Center, we'll go there. We're not paying for it.
Oh, but this is a state operation, not the tour companies.
Yeah.
No way.
That's industrial development.
They're unaccountable
Yeah.
entity.
They
Yeah,
have money.
they set it up that way.
People engage online, people engage through social media. I was on the board of Green Dance Community in Anchorage. Put it on Facebook, put it on, well, not Facebook anymore, put it on Insta, put it on all these other things that try to get some more interest and get these ideas out there to engage younger people that way. Because I think a lot of people aren't joiners because everything's so fractured on social media.
Do a TikTok video.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's how you reach them.
You know, get a younger person in to help with some of that. Getting.
I was just gonna suggest, I mean, I'm very supportive of DCC and. I think. And it just crushed me when we lost it, and I sort of wasn't as engaged up there, but I think we have people around that are really engaged with one issue. Why don't you go in and board and be. Might be.
Good idea.
About a single.
Well, also, I was thinking that on, because we've got people are expressing interest, but maybe you don't have to be a full-fledged board member, you know, because it ends up being a pretty big commitment, or else you end up just feeling bad about yourself because you don't do that much. So, yeah, right. You know what's expected, and then a month and a while later, you just like feel stressed about it. Or maybe something about individual, you know, you could be a specialist, like, you know, kind of like businesses have committees. I mean, I want to use the committee word or meetings, but still there is a place for something short of being a full-fledged board member. Yeah. And that's a good idea.
Yeah, having our meetings, I think is not a bad idea. Advertising our meetings and opening them, bring your issues to us, and we'll discuss it and decide if we have the capacity to deal with it.
It goes back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
About
Rather than rocking all of it on our own,
Yeah,
you know, having people bring it to us because, you know, we have enough, there's a lot of stuff, the first tier, second, third, but somebody might have a big issue that we don't know anything about.
Well, I think that there may be what Jerry says, a paradigm shift of some kind, and going with what Nancy says too. And I'm, you know, now in the gray haired category and never thought I would be, but here I am. Anyway, there are 30 and 40-year-olds out there, and where are they, and how do they want to be involved, or what do they really do care? You know, they really care about their environment and about climate change and all these issues. So how does this organization move forward with some of those people being involved in some way? And I don't know what that answer is, but that is, I think that's the future.
Yeah, I have a 25-year-old son who I have to ask on many occasions, like, what's going on? Like it's like a cultural divide, and it's not just environmental issues. I'm like, can you please explain this to me? And he's very intelligent, he's very bright, he does. But I realize that no matter how intelligent and insightful he is, we have completely different feelings about getting involved in stuff, and I see like the age of the room and everything, and so what came to mind when I was seeing all these people here is everybody talk personally to your 25, 30, whatever, and have a one-on-one conversation with them, just like I do with my youngest ones, like, explain this to me, please, you know, because I really do think it's a whole nother cultural world out there that we in some ways just don't get. And I'm always blown away when he does explain it to me. And I try to like be very respectful of what he's saying, but I do get what Nancy's saying about how they're not joiners. It's like they've just been disillusioned badly over the last 20 years during their most crucial time, and they just feel like it's futile or something. And so I just think the most thing we could do is be personally, everybody find one of those people of that generation and have a very close conversation and ask them in their heart of hearts, you know, like, explain this to me, like, why wouldn't you do this? And what would you do? You know, because we obviously are of a very like mind in certain ways. And I feel that divide, and I'm not sure that we as this age group can figure out how to get them going. You know, it has to come from them. They have to tell us.
And then bring that back to our board members. So we
Right.
can learn from it.
Exactly, yeah, let them tell us.
So, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Erica. I've been on a lot too. For some context, I'm gonna speak as like a generational speak maybe. And I've been involved in DCC or adjacent or paying close attention and having side conversations for a couple decades, I guess. I've lived in this community during that time because of my proclivity to like hook up with older people who have houses. So, like what people spoke to is absolutely real. When Kim spoke last night about what for a lot of folks in this room was kind of a universal experience of arriving here from elsewhere, and I've noticed how a lot of us do speak still, despite how much long we might have been here, we speak as outsiders primarily about this place. And that's not, I'm not putting a judgment on that, but we do it, and I do it, and talk about those first magical arrival moments. But then listening to Kim, I was thinking of all the friends I've made over the last 20 years this year who loved it here, and their coworkers were super racist, or they didn't feel safe at work because they were gay, or they couldn't get the medical care they needed, or it just was logistically impossible for reasons that are valid, but those are also pretty universal experiences of this place. And I've also been in a lot of rooms, like I've lived here mostly, but like have been in spaces where we're having the like, how do we get the young people involved? And I have been the young people involved, and then I'm the old people being like, oh, do you want to get the young people? And it's always the same thing. And like there is also a universality today. But what I really hear from older folks in conservation for whom like that is our main impetus in getting involved, there's not often a recognition that that has to go both ways. So if the we is saying, how do we get the young people to come to conservation events? Are we showing up to equitable housing events? Are we showing up to Pride? Are we showing up to Black Lives Matter? It goes both ways. It goes lots of ways. And if you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone to the spaces where the people that you want involved are, they're not going to come to you.
Good point.
Yeah, well, that sticker idea, you know, this is the people we want to lure in are sticker people. Our kids are sticker people. Everybody's got stickers on their bottles in the back of their vehicles. Imagine how many of those thousands of stickers that say, you got a problem with this? Call this number, DCC, and some cool little design that is not black and white, that blends in with everybody else's. That would be a pretty cool idea to get people who maybe just have parked their car next to Nancy's Subaru, sees that bumper, sees that sticker, and calls. And they might be somebody who we could use that wants to be involved. I love
I
that
probably should
idea.
take Al Gross off there before I put on.
We just slap it over him. There we go. Got it.
Thank you, Janine. We didn't talk about Healy gas, just like. So there was this whole, all these calories we expended, all the newsletters we wrote, the people we talked to. And UC Valley got the 208,000 acres to develop coal bed methane, and I think they drilled one well. And we were told from the sides when we fought this, which was in the mid-2000s, we even went to the state Supreme Court. We were told that UC Valley was just capturing this land so some bigger entity couldn't come in, which might have been true. And all we were interested was in reducing the size of it, not eliminating it, so that the stampede areas that were sensitive to the park would be protected. But we lost on that, which is fine, but this gas license had a duration and it expired in 21. So there's going to be no coal bed methane. They just had a 10-year license. It was under that shallow gas program. Doesn't exist anymore. Just passed, came and went. So a lot of things we're helped by the course of events as much as by anything we ever did. I'm not downplaying because I do think it's important to set a certain tone and be open. So I'm hoping we can make some changes to do that.
Well, and to be a watchdog, I think. I think that the process of that coal bed methane was very different because resistance was met. I think it would have been a lot easier for someone to swoop in and, you know, can put a compressor station on my driveway if you wanted to. I mean, that was part of the point. You know, how close to the park it was, but also, you know, the communities. And so I think to answer the first question of this round, I believe that for the next 50 years, one of the most important roles for Denali Citizens Council is to continue to be a very informed watchdog that speaks up and makes everybody else do their jobs better.
Just a little side note, just a little personal story that happened throughout this forum. The person who ran the early stages of the gas exploration license process was Pat Galvin. And Pat Galvin even came to this borough. He later on became the not resources commissioner, revenue commissioner, thank you, for the state of Alaska under Palin, I think it was. Yeah. Anyway, his wife is Elise Galvin, who's as liberal as they come. You know, so it's very interesting having met Pat when he was a DNR spokesperson for the shallow gas program. Very nice guy. And then later on, his wife emerges as a liberal, you know, standard bearer. So it's a very diverse state, and you do have to get along with everybody. You can not give in, but talk nicely, I think, so that you don't lose your ability to influence.
So, Charlie, and I think we're gonna wrap up here.
If you could, I just want to give a couple of last words after you wrap.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think we've had a great conversation. I've written some notes down. That's not really my job. I did it anyway. As people were talking, and some really great thoughts have come out of this. I'd say keep having those conversations when you want to stay for a little while. But we did want to wrap up by 8 so people can go off and do their thing. But happy to stay around for a while if people want to say more and try to figure out what the next paradigm shift might be for DCC or where we're going in the future. And I wanted to, and I'm not going to do it, but I was going to ask people here, anybody here, all the people here who want to be on the board, stand up.
And not by going out, but
I'm not by running out the door. That is the issue, and I think that it's an issue that all nonprofits face. It's just very, very difficult to get people to serve on boards and be involved. And there's got to be some more really, really good conversations and take to heart what Erica said, I think. So thanks everybody for coming. I think there's more food. Wait. I think we have covered.
Please.
Yeah. yeah, before you all get up to go, and sorry for standing with my back to you all. Thank you all so much for coming. These actually were really awesome ideas that came out. And I just wanted to say kind of one piece of feedback to folks like Erica and Dave and so forth who have, you know, some solid ideas for getting into local, you know, re-engaging the local community and people in the next generation. Right now, our board kind of lacks capacity to do that. We don't have, like, we're barely a local board at this point. Our one year-round resident, Van Eagleson, just left the board. The rest of us aren't here. We desperately need, if we're going to be a local grassroots conservation group for Denali that's able to do things like meet people where they're at on housing or whatever else, we need some kind of seed there. We need some kind of seed to help make that happen, because right now that's not where our capacity is. We also got a recommendation online for, yes, the TikTok channel is a great idea. And I agree, but I can't do that from where I live in Oregon effectively. So we're going to need that. Second thing, Jeff Bowman continued to comment online. He says hi to a bunch of people, and I mentioned Lisa Davis in particular that he hadn't mentioned before. But he also he had to get off the call, but he did say that he has an unworn long sleeve T-shirt with the original DCC color logo on it, large size, that he is willing to send to whomever is willing to make the largest donation to DCC this evening. So I don't exactly know how to filter that. But 20, I have a bid for $25. Do I have a bid for more than $25 for the T-shirt? $50 from Dominic. What's that? Or join the board. Yeah, whoever joins the board, you win the T-shirt. But oh, and there it is. Jerry has a copy. We have a bid for 50 anymore. $100 from Shan Merson. Yeah, Linda wants to find out. All right, $100 going once. 125. 125. All right, he says it is unworn. Going once. 150 from Shan. Dominic, are you still in? 175. High rollers here. Dan's letting Dominic have it. Thanks for, are you letting him have it? Thanks for driving up the price there. Yeah. And I think we will. Well, Steve, do you want to do door prizes or did we? Yeah, Steve has door prizes.
Charlie, tomorrow.
What's that?
Tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Oh, and Barb wanted, while Steve's bringing door prizes up, Barb wanted me to remind you that there is a farewell brunch tomorrow at McKinley Creekside from 9 to 11. You can show up anytime during that time. The many board members as can will be there the entire time. We'd love to hear your personal feedback on what we've talked about tonight. And we would love just to see you and share more stories and be able to say goodbye. And we've got a ton of food still, so please do that. I leave just a tiny little bit for me. Steve, we have time for 3 door prizes, 3 only.
I heard him say 8.
3, and it has to go quickly.
Okay, these are questions about the park.
Steve's going to ask a question. Yeah, first good answer.
Question about park cabins. Which park cabin was burned down by the park carpenter?
Igloo.
Still there.
Government draw.
No, it was filled with gravel. The Moody Cabin, burned in 1960 by Bill Nancarrow.
On purpose?
So, I like the color. Pearson. Did he stay in that are no longer existent? Which two cabins did Grant Pearson stay in, recounted in My Life of High Adventure, no longer exists? Park cabin. That qualifies, yep. In the thoroughfare? Copper Bar Cabin?
Down the.
Down the Toplat, oh, the Sheldon Cabin?
Yeah, Sheldon.
I don't think Pearson stayed there.
I hear people voting for Jones answer.
Alternate answers are the Lower Savage Cabin used to be on U Creek, and it is now on Sunday Creek. So, but he stayed in the one on U Creek, which no longer exists. And Upper Windy was built in 1932. There was an earlier Upper Windy that he stayed in. That's only about 50 feet from the other, from the present Upper Windy. One more. Which park cabin does not qualify for the National Register of Historic Places? Who said that? The sequel to Into the Wild. I guess it's too easy. Which park cabin filled with gravel? Which park cabin was seasonal housing for a bus driver?
Oh,
Dan, you know?
Here's one.
There are a lot of calls of Pearson Cabin.
1976, Linda Franklin stayed at the Sanctuary Cabin and rode a bus from there.